Action.
Members of Synod, I bring you greetings from Grafton's Registry Office, where we, along with you, are preparing for the 36th Synod. This is the first time that we are using digital technology. Along with you, we hope that it works. For us, not only does it save time, but it lessens our carbon imprint. Synod this year commences on Saturday the 16th of June at Christchurch Cathedral, Duke Street, Grafton, and we commence with a Synod Eucharist. And I'd like to encourage all members of Synod to be present at this Synod Eucharist, because it is in actual fact our first item of business for the day. It is there that the presidential address will be delivered. After the presidential address and the conclusion of the Eucharist, we will be moving across to the Ex-Services Club at 2 Wharf Street, South Grafton, for a 10:45 start. It is hoped that the evening will conclude at 7 p.m. on that day. The following day, Sunday, there will be worship at South Grafton at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock on the Sunday morning at Christchurch Cathedral. The order for business of Synod commences at 10:30 a.m. back at the Ex-Services Club on Wharf Street, South Grafton, and again we hope to conclude the day at 3 p.m. Just a reminder to Synod members that if they have anything of value in their cars, to please take them out and take them in to Synod with them. This is due to a number of break-ins that occurred just recently when we held the Discernment Synod there. I'm going to hand over to the Registrar now to take you through the order of business.
Hello, I'm Chris Nelson, the Registrar, and welcome to the second part of the Synod presentation. Just going through some of the nuts and bolts of the Synod. The Synod papers were mailed out on Monday the 28th of already, Australian Post permitting, but you all have access to them on the Diocesan webpage through a members section for Synod. If you don't have access or you've forgotten how to access that webpage, please contact the Registry Office and we will help you through that. At the Synod, Wi-Fi is available, so that if you're dealing with your materials electronically, you should be able to connect up with Wi-Fi. Just a few housekeeping arrangements for Synod. Just remember that we're catered for Synod. Lunches are available at Synod, but please organise your own evening meal for Saturday night and any other nights that you're in Grafton. Also, you'll need to organise your own accommodation. Just a final little bit of information is that the Cathedral bookstore will be there at the Synod as usual, and so that you can access that in your break. So they would like you to bring your cash or your credit card. Ordinance of Synod. There wouldn't be a Synod unless we had some ordinances to deal with, but this year we're going to be fairly light on in ordinances. We'll only have one ordinance under consideration, and that was something that arose out of the 2017 General Synod. You may remember that at the start of February in our special Synod, we dealt with a number of the canons of the General Synod and passed some ordinances that deal with those. This was to be one of those, but there were some questions that needed to be answered before we could put it into the papers, and unfortunately those answers didn't come early enough for February, so it's been held over to the June Synod. So we have one ordinance to deal with. Being a General Synod canon, we cannot deal with, amend the meat of the canon. We can only accept it or reject it. The only amendments we could do is in the cover sheet of the ordinance. Many of you may be aware that requests went out for parishes about comments about Chapter 10 of the Diocesan Governance Ordinance, asking for comments. So many of you may be expecting to see an amendment ordinance for Chapter 10. That won't be available for this Synod. There was a lot more work in that than was possible to do before the Synod. So it is more than likely something that's going to be prepared for next year, the 2019 Synod. And while it's not likely that there'll be a lot of amendments to the ordinance we're considering, there is an amendment sheet in your mail-out pack that you use if you're proposing amendments for ordinances. Elections. Every 3 years we have a major synod where all positions are open for election. This is not one of those. This is an in-between year. So we're only covering those corporate trustees where one position comes up each time for election, and we cover vacancies. And this year we have one vacancy, and that's for the General Synod position. We have one of our lay members that had to resign from their position as a General Synod representative for the diocese, and we need to fill that position. We now know the planning of General Synod, so that we know that the General Synod is being planned to be held from the 31st of May 2020 and will hold for a week. So I think it finishes about the 4th or 5th of June 2020, and it'll be held on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So if you're considering nominating someone for that lay vacancy or being nominated yourself, bear those dates in mind, because they will be the dates most likely that you'll have to be available. Like all elections, we'll go to a ballot if we get more than the number of people that we require being nominated, so that we can then hold the election. But if there's one or less nominations to each of these positions, then it will go ahead without a ballot. The period for nominations will close during the Synod. It's proposed that will be 2 p.m. on Saturday. The nominees are encouraged to supply a profile. That's a single A4 sheet with a photograph and some basic information about yourself that gives Synod members a chance to understand why you may be a good fit for the position. There's a specific requirement that if you're nominating to be a corporate trustee, that you supply a filled out declaration that you're a fit and proper person. This is a requirement under the Australian Prudential and Regulatory Authorities Act, that we have a fit and proper person dealing with these matters, and so we'll need you to fill that position out before, fill that declaration out before you get nominated. Now, for all Synod members, please read the profiles that are provided before voting and use it to help inform your vote. With all synods, we have motions, and of course we've got a number of procedural motions and that set the synod running and enable us to do the major bits of our business. But we also have some other motions already on the books. Topics of 2 of those motions are about the mission and objectives of the Cathedral Chapter, and we have a motion on refugees and asylum seekers. So please look at those at the motions pack, the motions booklet you got in your pack. But of course, further motions may be accepted in the Synod on the floor of the Synod at the start of each day. The Synod considers the annual reports and relating to the previous year. It also considers the audited financial reports and the budget. So these have to be adopted by Synod as part of the annual process. Just talking a bit about the financials in brief, and not to steal any thunder from those presenting it, the diocese results show a surplus of 1.4 million. Now that's obviously an extraordinary figure, and that's the figure that's actually reported in the audit financials. That's because we need to report the money coming in through the diocesan financial challenge and other sorts of money in our accounts. So it makes it look like we made a huge profit in that year. But that money actually went out to cover our debts and commitments to professional standards. Our figure is much more close to a break even in reality. Last year's figure was 185,000. For the corporate trustees, it shows an operating profit of 426,000, and that excludes the trust disbursements and revaluations. So the corporate trustees, as part of its operations, puts out money as requested from trusts to the parishes that are beneficiaries of that trust. That's not shown in the 426,000. AFGD made a modest profit in 2017 in difficult operating circumstances, and that was 31,000. For those who are keen on the financial accounts, you'll notice that the presentation is different and some of the figures have changed. This is because we have a new auditor for the diocese, and the new auditor has provided different format and different treatment of some of the financial information. We're pleased about the ongoing improvement in our financial practices, and we're pleased about, with the new auditor, lifting those standards even further. Our budget for 2019 will be presented at this synod. So that's looking forward for 6 to 18 months away. Our budget is almost a break-even budget. It's actually showing a loss of 2,300, which is much better presentation at this stage of the game than the previous budget, which was showing at that time a $65,700 loss in the budget. Last year, the 2018 budget was supplemented by extra pledges made by parishes. This time around, we're starting off closer to a break-even. Now, in saying a break-even, we're not considering any professional standards claims in that, or the effect of any redress scheme. So we've got to plan for that separately. But in the normal operating of the diocese, we're much closer to that break-even. The pledge level for parishes will be very close to the 2017 level, and it's shared amongst the parishes according to their income above $60,000. We have a number of special presentations in the day. We'll have a presentation from the Church Missionary Society. We'll have apart from the financial reports, we'll have the Schools Commission presentation. But we'll also have a special presentation on the Diocesan Mission and Ministry Overview. And I'm going to invite Reverend Canon Zoe Everingham to come and talk about that for a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Zoe. In your Synod papers, you will find a new Mission and Ministry Overview and MMO. Back in 2012, an MMO was designed, or after consultation, for the diocese, and it is prudent that we look again at the direction that the diocese is going in. And so, back in February 2017, I was invited by Bishop Sarah McNeill to conduct a planning day for the Bishop in Council. Later on, as a member of Bishop in Council myself, I was part of a team that took a strategic planning process around the diocese to discern together where our direction may be and how we're being called by God to see a vision of God's mission in this particular diocese. And so we ran 4 sessions across the diocese with the LLM conference, and also for the different regions, the northern and Richmond, the central and the southern MMRs. As a result, 152 people took part in that strategic planning process, and we were able to collate that material that was collected through Mentimeter and also by scribing, and from that collected data, which was presented to Bishop in Council, we were then able to summarise the findings. A summary of those findings was presented at Discernment Synod and then taken back to Bishop in Council and further consolidated, you could say, into the document that you have in your papers. At Bishop in Council, a prayer was written, and also a vision and mission statement written as well. So in the summary, summarising of the data that was collected, we identified 5 priorities for the diocese, and those priorities were mission focus, equipping people, developing local partnerships, governance and culture, and restructuring the diocese. The dot points under those priorities represent some guidance in regard to how those priorities may be achieved. This is a descriptive document and not a prescriptive document, in that it is a guidance for the parishes to use across the diocese. It honours the strategic planning process and the feedback that we received from all the participants in that process. And it acts as a guide for individual parishes to look at how they may connect with that vision, but in their individual localised contexts. We have also printed the 5 marks of mission on the back of that document to link in with the vision of the Anglican Communion worldwide. And so I ask you to look very carefully at that document in your papers before you come to Synod, so that you are prepared in regard to the feedback that we have received across the diocese, and how Bishop in Council on your behalf have collated that information and made it into a usable document for you.
Do we let the video stop there?
And so, members of Synod, that brings us to the conclusion of our pre-Synod meeting. As I said at the beginning, the first one that we have done by using digital technology. Can I ask all members of Synod to please take the time to prayerfully consider the paperwork that is before them. Whilst this Synod may not have a great depth of meat to it, the things that come before us are still God's business, and so I commend them to you as members of Synod. The Lord be with you.